Welcome. You're watching Rugby with Rifle, a podcast about all things rugby and life, with your host, Danny Pabone and Rifle Scudder.
Welcome to Rugby with Rifle, a podcast about all things rugby and life. As always, I'm joined here with my friend Rifle. Rifle, how are you doing, sir?
Doing very well. Thank you, Danny. How about yourself?
Doing great, doing great.
Wonderful.
So, looking forward to our weekend in July where we're going to be watching the USA Eagles against the England national team there in Washington, D.C. So that's going to be a great weekend. Also, the Lady Eagles are playing Fiji. So it's going to be a double header. So I'm looking forward to that. Going to see the game with you, your family, and a few other friends. So it's going to be a great weekend, Rifle. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, very excited. We'll come here from Virginia. We'll get on the Amtrak. Take my son, and we got an exchange student hosting for the holidays, the summer. So he'll go with us from France. And yeah, looking forward to seeing that and seeing Ilona in the flesh. Seen her on TV before, but really excited to see her actually on the field playing. So it's going to be good.
Yes, that's it's going to be great. Being that like we have spoken before, the women's team is actually ranked in the top 10 in the world. So it's going to be exciting to see. Not sure, is Fiji? I'm not sure if Fiji is ranked in the top 10.
I
Don't
don't know
remember.
currently. No.
But either way, it's going to be great exposure for the women's side as well. So, especially in the US, as we've
Yeah.
spoken before, with the Rugby World Cup being hosted by the US in 2031. So it's going to be an exciting weekend.
Yeah,
So
looking forward to that.
today in this episode, we are going to be talking about what professional rugby looks like in the United States. And our professional rugby league is known as the Major League Rugby, MLR, not to be confused with Major League Baseball, MLB, which is another sports league, obviously, baseball league. So, yeah, so just looking at this league, Rifle, which started not too long ago, 2018 was their first official season. So, just 7 short years ago. Yeah, so it has a very obviously interesting history already, being that there's been many teams that have joined the league, had joined the league for a couple of years, then decided not to be part of the league. I think there's about 5 or 6 teams that have joined the league for a couple of years and then decided to leave for various reasons that we are going to briefly talk about in the later in the episode. So yeah, so just looking at the numbers, you know, as many know, I'm a huge American football fan and have been following it for uh, three three decades now. It it's just the contrast, and obviously, you know, anybody that knows the history, if people that know if you do know the history of the NFL, NFL was created in the 1920s. I think the first name was the American Professional Football Association for like 2 3 years before they changed the name to the National Football League. So it's been around for 105 years. So obviously it's gonna be more organized than a league that's only been around 7 years. And just looking at the numbers that I was reading, right, for the last year, the Major League Rugby's total revenue was just under $16 million, And then we have the NFL, whose revenue last year was just under 24 billion with a B dollars. So, you know, I would have loved to be, maybe in my early 20s or whatever in the 1920s to actually experience what the NFL went through during its infancy, the headaches, trying to put all these teams together, because as you know, it's just not a matter of just putting, hey, you want to play for our league? Okay, let's go play. I'm going to pay you, $40,000 a year or whatever. It's not it's not that easy. You have players that you have to think. You have to create contracts. You have to have medical staff. You have to have coaches. You have to have venues to play the games at. So you have to get contracts to play at those venues. So, there's a lot that goes into creating a league. And then you have to have funding, you have to have investors to give you money in order for you to run the league. So, you know, just looking through the Major League Rugby and all it's been through for over the past 7 years, it's very interesting to dig deep into what it takes to create a professional league in any part of the world, not just in the United States.
Yeah, I think my mind's immediately running places now that you mentioned that. You sent me a picture the other day of a Texas high school, and their football field cost more than what the rugby made in a whole year. I mean, that field
Yes.
probably cost more than what they've made in the last 7 years. And that's a high school field in Texas. So, like you say, there's so many things. We very fortunate. We sit at home on our cushy chairs with the air conditioner going, and we watch a game, and we think, oh, 80 minutes of rugby, that's good. But like you say, there's so many things that have to fall in place. You have to get referees, you have to get umpires, you have to get guys that are qualified. They have to go through exams. They have to stay qualified. They have to re-engage. They can't just do one test and then, blow for the next 5 years because the
Yeah.
laws are changing. So things like that you don't think about when you're watching the game. But if you take, for example, I'm South African, I'm American, but born in South Africa. If you take the countries that were colonized by England, so if you would take New Zealand, if you take Australia, if you take England, if you take South Africa, if you take any of those countries and you take one of America's sports, had it be baseball, had it be basketball, had it be American football, and you start a league of that sport in one of those countries, you're starting with zero, because
Hmm.
all people want to watch in those countries is, soccer and rugby. That's what we play, in cricket. We don't have all of these sports that America has. So I can just imagine we don't have that kind of stuff in South Africa. When I grew up, you're a boy, you were born with a rugby ball in your hand. That was it. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's all we knew was rugby, and still to this day. So if you come out and someone comes up with this great idea, oh, we're going to start a baseball league in South Africa, or a basketball or a football league, no one's going to go. We're so, competitive. We're so focused on rugby. No, I don't want to learn anything new. There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing now. So just to get the interest. Now, on the flip side of that is America is so big. There's so
Yes.
many people here that in South Africa, if you get 1% of people that are going to watch football, and you get 1% in America that are going to watch rugby, you've already got more people in America than all of South Africa, about number wise. So if you have a game in America like rugby now that's popular around the world, growing around the world, more people doing it, men and women, youth playing it, so a lot of things that can attract more people. Yes, definitely it can grow, but most certainly in the beginning, like you say, money. I mean, what fields are you going to play on? There's not a rugby field here. If you go to New Zealand, Australia, England, South Africa, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, What fields are you talking about? You're talking about Eden Park, Ellis Park. You're talking about all these stadiums that who plays at? Our national rugby team. You come to America, where does a rugby team play? You got to find fields that they can play. They got to take off the soccer posts. They got to put rugby posts on. They got to take down, the NFL posts. So you got to find a field where these guys can play. Then what season do they play? Because it clashes with their seasons that they saw. I mean, yeah, there are 101 things that you have to look at. Then you got to get, if you want, you got to get TV contracts. That's not even contracts with the players. Now you got to get television sponsors to say, okay, how many people are going to watch? Is it worth spending all that money on television time and camera time and all of that? And we're only going to make a little bit. So yes, to run a professional, organized, league is a lot of work. So most definitely, it's not just sitting at home watching a game saying, "Oh, that was good." There's way more that go into that. So the numbers are small, but they're growing. I mean, I'm sure if you look at what they made in year one and what they've made last year, I'm sure the numbers are way bigger and growing every year. I don't know. I must be very honest. I don't follow the rugby league in America. I don't know. I follow players. If I see players from overseas coming and doing well, I follow a player, but I'm not on top of the numbers and things like that in this league. But I would guess my opinion would be that it has grown from 7 years ago to where it is now. And now with the woman doing so well, the American woman in the top 10 in the world, I mean, they drawing a lot of crowds, even more than the men sometimes. You got stars like Ilona that we've had on, and we've spoken about her. She's going to be playing when we go. So the game is growing. More people are getting into the seats. So yeah, it's definitely growing. Rugby World Cup here in 2031. So let's talk in 7 years again and see how many people are sitting in a rugby stadium in America to watch rugby.
Yeah, the potential for this game is just through the roof. And I say that because, you know, I've mentioned this before. If you had mentioned to me, just 2 years ago, before I went on this journey of learning about uh, rugby with you, and we spoken about another league that is in its development stage, the National Rugby Football League, and that's pretty much how this podcast came out of, because of my getting to know about that league that's currently in development. Um, you know, the only thing I knew about rugby, and again, I've mentioned this before, was at the time I didn't know it was called the scrum. Um, but if you would mention to me just 2 years ago, game of rugby, the only thing I could think of is, there's a bunch of men pretty much crouching and pushing each other, and they're fighting for the ball. That's the and most people that know about rugby don't necessarily follow it, but know of the game of rugby. I would say 99% of the people will tell you the only thing they know about rugby is the scrum, but they couldn't tell you what in the world is happening.
Yeah,
So yeah, so just again, just coming from somebody that's an avid sports fan and that's followed the NFL for the past 3 decades. As soon as I started learning about the game of rugby and learning the rules and just watching games, I was like, wow, I wish I would have done this before.
yeah.
It's such an
Yeah, it's
amazing
definitely. I
game.
mean, the first time, I went to our tribe or Edgewater education where all of this was born from, that's 4 or 5 years ago, and I wore a Springbok shirt. No one knew what it was. Some people would see a Springbok, one or two people would say, hey, nice shirt, what does that mean? Where's that from? And I'd say, you don't know the Springboks? And they know, well, what is that? I'm like, oh my goodness gracious me, that's South Africa. That's our national team. And now last time where we were in Georgia and we had another one of our summits, there were other people other than myself wearing Springbok rugby shirts. So, I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's definitely growing and getting bigger. So, rugby is definitely growing here in America, which is wonderful.
If you would have showed me back then that the Springbok jersey, I was like, I would have thought, oh, John Deere has merchandise now. John
Yeah,
Deere, the tractor company.
yeah, green and
I was
gold.
like, no, it's a Springbok jersey. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I thought it was John Deere.
Yeah, they look the same.
So with that, everyone, let's get to it. Again, we're going to be talking about the Major League Rugby, which is the professional rugby league here in the United States. So currently, the league has 11 teams. Um, Up to, I think it was 2023, it actually had 13 teams. So the two teams that were in the Western Conference were actually, I believe, it was when the league started originally, it was 12 teams. So you had six teams in the Western Conference and six teams in the Eastern Conference. So, it was even out. So the first official game was in, like I said, in April of 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And there were 12 teams. And these are the teams that are currently in the league. We have five in the Eastern Conference and six in the Western Conference, totaling 11 teams. So that's pretty much how the league is broken up. So we don't have any teams in the middle of the country. It's all either Eastern or Western. So we don't have any teams in, well, there used to be a team in Colorado. We'll talk about that in a few minutes of the teams that are no longer in the league. So yeah, so um,
World rugby is, we have the North and South.
mhm,
That's the big division between rugby in the world. Not in America, but if you look, we always talk Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, and yeah, in
yeah,
America, it's that rivalry, West against East. It's
yes,
always that, West and East play against each other. So yeah, that's funny.
yes, yep. And then usually, again, in American sports, you have teams more spread out because you have more team franchises. So obviously, if you have more teams, there's going to be more teams all over around the country, in the middle of the country, the western part, the eastern part. So yeah, so it's interesting because there's one city that you would think would have a team because every sports league has a team in this state or city, and that is New York. So when I first saw this map, I was like, wait, there's no New York team? How is that possible? New York probably being uh, one of the, well, some will argue one of the best sports cities in the world. Obviously, if you're from Boston, you wouldn't say that, but that's a whole nother story. But up to 2 years ago, there was a New York team. I think they were called the New York Rugby Club of New York, if I'm not mistaken, and their nickname were the Iron Workers. And we're going to talk about something interesting about that New York team in a few minutes. So, yeah, so there was a New York team up to about 2 years ago, not anymore.
Yeah, just if I look here, Danny, you got Old Glory, which
Yep.
is the DC. You got Old Glory there, and then you got New England.
Yep.
So I mean, those teams compared to look how far spread Seattle and Utah and see how
Hmm.
far those others are from one another. So in my mind, I'm just thinking that maybe if there's so few teams on the other side of the nation, and you've got New England, you've got DC, you've got Carolina, those teams are really, it's just a couple of hours in the car, and you can go from Carolina to New England. It's not far.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other hand, you get in a car and you drive all the way from Seattle to Utah or Los Angeles, you in a car for hours. So to have so many teams condensed in one small area, I'm just wondering if that would be the best idea, to have all those people playing rugby in one area. But as you say, New York did have a team, and we'll see just now why they don't anymore.
Yes, yes. I guess a lot of that has to play into the sports culture of the United States. For example, New York sports fans don't necessarily get along with Boston sports fans. So if you have a lot of New York sports fans, it's like, I'm not going to Boston to watch rugby.
Yeah,
I don't like Boston. It's just the sports culture.
yeah.
I don't know why. In my mind, it's so dumb. If you love sports, you love sports. It's a good game. It's a good game. I guess that's just part of the sports culture. Is that something that happens a lot in that you know of in South Africa when it comes to sports?
No, we have huge rivalries, but as I said before, because our game is rugby or cricket, we
Hmm.
go wherever because the game is bigger than the team.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to go somewhere because that team is playing. I'm going because there's a game of rugby. I'm in love with rugby. I want to watch rugby. Rugby is what it's all about. There just happens to be, you need two teams to play a rugby game. It doesn't matter where the game is played. Rugby is there, so we'll go. So in South Africa, we have the rivalry, yes, but
Hmm.
it's, man, my team against yours. I'm going to be there. I'm going to shout louder than you. I'm going to, I'll be there before the game, 4 hours before you, and I'm going to have the biggest party before. But I'll be there. Where here, as you say, people say I'm not going there because that team's going to play, and I don't want to watch it. We don't have that. No.
Yes, as in most stuff in America, we're unique.
Yeah, but no,
People
it's
come to
all about
America, I was like,
rugby,
why
not
do
the
you do
team.
this?
Yeah,
That's. I mean, well, that's a whole nother podcast.
yeah. Moving along.
Yes, yeah, moving along. So the other interesting thing was Atlanta had a team, a rugby team when the MLR first started, first couple of years. And then I believe either the third or fourth year, the Atlanta team moved to Los Angeles. So now the Los Angeles rugby team was originally located in Atlanta. So there's, you know, that was one of the original six Eastern Conference teams. So that's why you only have five teams on the eastern part. Again, and also you have New York that was a team in the Eastern Conference that no longer exists. So yeah, and the other interesting, huge news, many in the rugby world, especially here in the States, would say is a very probably one of the best, some would say the best rugby player in the world, Antoine Dupont, became or joined the ownership group in the Los Angeles rugby team. So that's a huge news for here in America, is that a player with such, that's known around the world, and again, is considered one of the best. Some would say the best rugby player in the world currently, joining the ownership team of a rugby team here in America. That in my eyes, that's huge.
Yes, especially at the player of his caliber. That's very exciting. That is excellent news for rugby in America, I believe.
Yes, yes, and him being an owner and investor, I'm sure he's gonna want, hey, he wants his investment to pay out. So that it's
Yeah,
gonna be interesting to see over the next few years. Obviously he plays in France, but it's gonna be interesting. What his marketing or promotion of the league is going to be over the next few years. Now that he's uh, uh, part owner of the team, it's gonna be
yeah.
interesting to
I
see.
saw a documentary the other day. I can't remember where it was. He was here practicing one day with the NFL team.
Hmm.
I can't remember
Okay.
what team it was, but he was hanging out with an NFL team. And they spoke to him and, went through some of their moves and chatted with him. So that's obviously they're trying to build that relationship between him coming over here, bringing rugby in, guys from the NFL talking to him. So the sad thing for me is that the NFL team, I hope that their coaches and management showed them the magnitude of the stature of rugby player that Antoine Dupont is.
Hmm.
They've got this guy. Okay, here's a guy from France. He's going to throw the ball around. He plays rugby. Big deal. Okay, let's play with him, throw the ball, and we'll go and practice. It's like if you say in rugby, someone, you got a Tom Brady or you got Patrick Mahomes coming to
Hmm.
play with the New Zealand All Blacks or the South African Springboks one day, is coming to their practice. The guys don't know NFL, they don't know football. So you got this guy who plays that game, he throws a ball around. They say he's pretty good. Chuck him a ball, he can throw to us. We can talk about training and fitness for 5 minutes, and then we'll go practice. So I just hope that the guys realized who was in their midst, that they had in their locker room and change rooms that they could speak to. I mean, this guy could talk a lot about motivation. I mean, the same energy, testosterone, go team, things like that he could bring to them. So, but I saw him the other day, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, just on a little detour there about Antoine Dupont. He was talking to an NFL team.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And one thing, just we're gonna show just a few clips of different plays of Week 13 of the MLR. Um, just watching a few highlights of the various games over this past week. The commentators quite often would mention players as former college American football players, or even on a few occasions, former NFL players
Okay.
as well. So that I guess the beautiful thing about, and what gets me excited about rugby in America is the the huge numbers of college athletes, specifically in the college American football, the huge numbers of players, and we're talking about thousands of players every year, that are really good athletes. I mean, top tier athletes, but for whatever reason, they don't end up playing in the NFL. Now,
Yeah.
it could be, they were overlooked, or it could be that, there's only a certain amount of draft picks that an NFL team can make. So, there in the NFL draft, there's only two. If you let's see, 7 times 32, that's 210, 234. So every year the NFL drafts about 235 players. That's it.
Yeah.
235 players. So we're talking about thousands of college athletes, and only 235 are selected to the NFL. So there's a huge pool of players that rugby could go to in this country, because you could turn that. an American football player and teach them the game of rugby because they're very similar in many aspects. So that's why I'm so excited because there is that potential growth in this
Yeah,
country for the game.
just talent wise, America
Yes.
should be the best in any sport just because of the numbers, pure numbers that they have, and the talent that
Mhm.
this country has in sports, men and women. It's phenomenal. So yes, that's very exciting.
Yes. Exciting it is. So just moving on here. So the league format for the MLR is like we have spoken before. We have the Western Conference, we have the Eastern Conference. So the Western Conference, because there are 6 teams, they play 8 in-conference matches and 8 cross-conference points. So essentially, they play 8 games against Western Conference teams and 8 games against Eastern Conference teams. Now, the Eastern Conference, since there's only currently five teams, they play 10 matches against Eastern Conference teams and 6 matches against Western Conference teams. And then, every team has 8 home teams. I'm sorry, 8 home matches and 8 away matches, which is typical of any American sports league. You have half home games and half away games. Now, this is interesting because there's only 5 teams in the Eastern Conference and 6 teams in the Western Conference. So the top this year, at least, the playoff format, because the playoff format has changed slightly over the past 7 years that this league has been in existence. So for the 2025 season, the top 4 teams of each conference makes the playoffs. So if you're in the Eastern Conference, there's only 5 teams. So it sucks that you're the only team that doesn't make it to the playoffs if you come last in the Eastern Conference. So again, very typical of American sports. Each conference semifinal, 1 versus 4, and then you have the second rank in the conference versus the third rank. And then obviously the winners of those go on to the conference final, and then the winners of the conference final goes on to play in the championship game, the Eastern Conference champion versus the Western Conference champion. So that's the final. The one thing that I was like, oh, okay. So the league point system follows the European rugby point system. So you have 4 points for win, 5 points if you have scored 4 more tries. If you lose, 0 points. It's a bonus point if 4 more tries are scored, or you lose by less than 7 points, and then 2 points if you score 4 more tries and you lose by less than 7 points. And then the draw is 2 points, 3 points if you score 4 more tries, 4 or more tries. So I was a little surprised by that. I was like, okay, they have the same point system as as other leagues that we spoke about. The United Rugby Championship, Top 14, the Gallagher Premiership League in England. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense to just take something that's very solidified and has been going for
Hmm.
many, many years. If it's working, just take that system and bring it over
Yep.
here instead of recreating new points and all of that. And then later, when America does grow and becomes bigger, now you got to change it again to line up with the rest of the world. So just take what they're doing and bring it into your system. I think that's good.
Yes. Yeah. That is. And again, just going back to the American culture, we take stuff and we make it our own.
Yeah.
So that's why I was a
Daddy
little
didn't
shocked. I
do
was like,
that
oh
with
wow, they
us.
actually followed another leagues.
Yeah.
But also, just thinking about it, like you said, it does make sense because technically, even though the Major League Rugby is an independent league, in the sense that, like we've spoken about before, Rifle, in the United Rugby Championship and Top 14, Gallagher Premiership, all those leagues have something that you call relegation, which means if you come last in the league, you get demoted to a Division Two league. In
Right.
America, you know, because the sport is growing, they don't have the ability to do that because. Thank you for watching this episode of Rugby with Rifle. Remember to press the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet to support this podcast.